So, how should we go about it? Because everyone had a little bit of a doubt about how this evening should proceed.
Well, I thought, Sudipta, that um, the the summaries of what is happening in the studios and what happened in the lectures should be kept as tools with which we discuss with the students, rather than explicitly um, convey to them that these are the parameters that have arisen. I think that's something that they will tinker with, and they'll find out, or they'll come with their own version of it. Um, but on the other hand, the schedule of work and the kind of manner of doing the work, that we should tell them explicitly, because that's going to affect the next few days in a very significant way. Yeah. So I think that was the discussion amongst us about the program, I mean the lectures and what happened in each room were very good, and that's a very good idea of everybody's thought process. But we should keep it, some, not announce it. That's my feeling.
Yes, I had a similar kind of sense of it, Professor Chaya, that that what each one of the participants and us have taken from the talks is something that is still being processed, and it is something that has influenced immediate responses and may find voice in the work that the studio has. But I thought that value should not be something that we apply to a particular situation. It's something that must be tested against the situations we are put in. And so we've already put the participants in, and we framed various exercises that have made them look at tools, at geography, at time, etc. And in that, certain values are apparent, and we can perhaps discuss that with them, as you have said. And I think those values will have to be tested against other exercises we will present today. So I think that's the way that I was thinking about it. And I think the other instructors, I think it's good to kind of have this conversation also with the participants so that they're clear that it is something that is an ongoing process.
So maybe the values that we come up with or have are triggers, potential places of beginning, contestations that I think could still be made somewhat explicit as pointers, as starters.
Yes, I imagine that. I mean, I think already, Sarosh, the way that, let's say, some of the consistent themes across, let's say, the choice of tools. I mean, just that is the last exercise. The way they gravitate around practices of food making is something that is across several groups. I mean, Shilpa and I were looking at the exercises put up by
I saw that.
person. And that's like a kind of if one could certainly take that in different ways. So you get a broad category, I imagine, and I find it difficult to say that food is a value. It's something reasonably obvious, but how one actually takes that into program is still open. And I think that, as you're saying, could be provocative. It could be on certain hypotheses of relationships, etc. That that a particular group and instructor want to explore. So I do think that that's the way that one should keep it open.
Sounds good.
I think every participant, all of us and all the participants have developed a certain intuition for the kind of thought process that seems to be a healthy thought process or a healthy feeling world. I think, uh, and that will generate the core values, which may have to be reminded of certain things which happened earlier from time to time to bring it into a kind of something which is not simply a self-indulgence, but is something which is fully understood. And that is the role of our discussion, that the room or the group is a way in which more voices than one are there, and through that the reminders of many of the things which we realized earlier will keep coming back into the formation. So I think that's a very good thing. I'm also thinking, Sarosh, in terms of the article by Bennett that you sent this morning, uh, in her idea of food as a coexisting form of life, that food and us are two forms of life which are coming into contact. And that was a wonderful way of framing that.
Right.
And if we look at all things like that, then we start seeing that it is the simultaneous and continuously interacting development of consciousnesses and forms, which is happening whether in Delhi or elsewhere. So I think that we can let surface in the manner in which the discussion happens. It will come. It will come. I'm confident of that.
So people are still joining, and I think a lot of participants are wondering what we are talking about. So
Yes.
we'll have to. We'll just wait for still people joining.
Yeah, I'm just sending Ayaz a message.
But in the meantime, we could probably have a little feedback from all of you about the Porsche conversations, and which are the ones which you felt have really kind of impacted you or impacted you the way you think. Are there ones which stand out for you more than others? You guys can just unmute yourself and speak up. I think it's nice to hear your voices. Everyone's on mute.
I
Hi.
think, oh yeah, oh sorry, okay.
Yeah. I was just saying that these conversations are like all wonderful. missed just one, but the rest was so like provoking, like thought provoking. And for me, one by Dilip Dakuna on wetness, it was something like it was really unexpected kind of a thing, and it really made me think of multiple things. And then we came to Ramayana and today's talk about Kabir and poetry, and it was so wonderful. Like I have read yesterday's, like day before yesterday's talk about the Ramayana and the cities of Ramayana. It was just so amazing for me to see them in that light. Like I had not thought of it in that way, the cities, and about the characters, and the way Ashia was talking and talking about living the story. So like how we can even connect to myths. So that was really wonderful for me. And similarly, the today's lecture as well, like today's talk, it's been really wonderful.
For me, I think Prem Chandravakar sir's the points that he put out and the way he put it out. I mean, because we know, I mean, we inherently know about these things about political symbols in the urban form, but to discuss about it in such detail, I think was eye-opener for this exercise. And also Arshia ma'am's talk on you know on the way she looked at myths, and you know that question that somebody had asked her a question like, what would you really want Delhi to. Even though she's not a Delhiite, she suggested that why not just let it grow, this is something that I have never considered, and I think my thinking slightly changed after that talk. So yeah, I think the conversations are really in adding to what we are learning by doing. So yeah, thank you.
I really enjoyed all the lectures, but I think the ones that really stuck out in my mind and that, I mean, I'm already starting to see it affect the kind of work that I'm doing. One was definitely, as Smita mentioned, Dilip Dakuna's. But I also really enjoyed Pankaj Veer Gupta's. And of course, the first one that we started with, which was Vidya Rao, and then sort of in continuation with that musical legacy, today's I've actually seen Shabnam Virmani perform, but to have her explain each of those dohas for us was actually really special. So I just thoroughly enjoyed the whole thing.
It's interesting how each one has a different one that's affecting them more. For me, it's not these. But anyway, that's not these in the sense that not in that order, perhaps. So I think it's great. It's great that everyone has seeing different things.
Well, for me, I think the biggest takeaway from the talks and the exercises was that the idea of how Lefebvre perceives space in a trialectic that got reinforced by how we look at space in three different ways: lived, conceived, and perceived. And this, I think, this idea is concretized in my mind now.
Concretized, be wary of that word though.
Yeah. I mean,
so Hussein is not there, but do you think we begin? Yeah.
Yeah, I have also been enjoying most of the talks. There are 2 or 3 talks which I have still to catch up on. But I mean, one thing, what I just felt, because today, today's talk was very impressive. Yesterday's talk was also, I mean, not yesterday, day before, yeah. Arshia Satas, yeah, that was also very like interesting, very engaging in a different way. But and obviously, it's sort of forcing us to stretch, our imagination, and not just imagination, also, the dimensions, like basically the widening, the thinking, the perspective, trying to see the same thing from very different angles possible, which perhaps we just ignore when we normally try to see, I mean, city or whatever, like, so it's like having multi perspectives on the same thing. But there's also, I felt there is a very clear, somewhere there is a very clear difference between this thing, like the uh, practical, pragmatic approach towards, the architecture. And when we are talking of the spiritual domain, it just ends up staying in that spiritual abstract domain. For example, if we are trying to understand what the idea of an ideal city can be, like the question as it was posed to this Shabnam Virmani today. So obviously, I mean, because probably that's not her subject, and she might not have, and obviously these things are very difficult to, how do we say, uh, uh, I mean, to give a structure, to such abstract things. But still, somewhere I still feel that there lies a proper, clear demarcation between the two approaches, like a practical approach and a more, abstract. I would, I am somewhere, I would be very happy to see where both of them, they can be, this certain form of idealism, it can be overlapped. And somewhere I thought, like, Prem sir's, his talk and his inputs, I found them to be a little interesting, because he's also, I think, perhaps trying to find a common, especially the way he engaged in this. After his talk, he engaged in one of the questions and he ended up writing an article in explaining that. So I thought that was, that was very very nice effort of full of humility, and where he really, really wanted to get into that, So, I mean, same thing, I think, with Arshia Sadar also, because I think somewhere we had a question, what would an idea, what is the dharma of Delhi? Then there was we, or how can the dharma of Delhi be imagined, or, so it's just that I just feel there's somewhere they just, I mean, probably they're not going one
So
step or.
Mansi, if I can ask you a question about this distinction that you've made between the ideal and the practical, if I can use those two words that you use, would you look at Prem's writing of the letter to us, or that blog post, as something which is ideal or practical?
I think it is a more reconciliatory approach, between the two. It's not, I would say, material and spiritual, somewhere, where you are trying to find the perfect answer um, from this, and you're trying to somehow, so that's why his letter was, I found it pretty engaging, because somewhere even he seems to be looking for some kind of answer, solutions to, because when we talk of this Ramarajya and, these perfect things which existed, and then we see what is there right now. So, what to do about it? It's beautiful, it's like being in two different atmospheres. When you're listening to the talk, you feel you're so absorbed. You're completely, when you're listening to her music, it really made me forget everything else. But the moment the talk was over, I was thinking, what is the takeaway from this talk? How am I going to use it for the city design? So, I'm asking you these questions because probably my mind is not so developed to, at this, I'm not able to engage so much. So I thought probably you people with so much experience, you can give me a direction. That's why I'm just putting it forward. So I was really it baffled me. I would really want to, have some, how do we say, if someone can clearly tell me, yeah, these are the points you can probably think over in this direction, you can think in this direction, and that's how you can. So the same thing with this, we are talking of three different cities in this Ramayana, and all three are very beautiful in their own sense. They have a very different description. But after that, then what? I think before I make further a big fool of myself, I'll just put myself on mute now and let you
No.
guys talk.
Not at all. I think
Don't.
the Vizier said, every morning I wake up in the skin of a donkey. Remember that. All of us are donkeys. Huh? So there's nothing to be ashamed of there. This struggle, every morning you wake up and you think about practically what will you do today. But before that or after that, there is also a feeling of sometimes elation at seeing the morning sort of open up, and sometimes a kind of depression. And both these things are going on simultaneously. And our actions through the day will be dependent on how much we pay attention to the opening of the day in a good way. And then the day's practical things we will be able to handle. That's the way I, at least, as a kind of old donkey, like to think about it. That every morning I have to remake my life. And what I'm doing as a designer is part of that. And there is no way in which I can state to anyone, least of all to myself, that this is what I'm doing. And yet, the opening up of the self to everything is the only way in which I reach some kind of quality. Quality cannot be, practically I might sort out or solve something, but quality will only come when I'm sort of feeling the world. And I think these two are complementary processes. They're not opposite processes. I would not agree that either Arshiya's talk or Shabnam's talk was about an ideal world. They were talking about the world and ways in which it may be experienced. I think that is where I would simply try to suggest to you that it need not be directly applicable, but it will do something to you. That I tried to say that also in the questions today, that much of this is something that goes and works inside us and will affect the kind of actions that we do. I think that's the way I would look at it. I don't know if that is of any help at all.
What Professor Chaya said is like what I thought mostly, wherein when I realized like how non-architects are describing about Delhi. For them, Delhi was nothing about Central Vista at all. They had found out life and meaning in Delhi in all parts of Delhi, apart from the Central Vista. And the way Pankaj also explained about a lot of issues which Delhi is facing, I kind of had a thought like, the Central Vista the project should be abolished and all that money should be spent in, doing something else about Delhi rather than, making a big deal about the whole Central Vista. That was the thing which came into my mind that day. Yeah, that was my opinion in that. Like, there is so much more about the Central Vista than the Central Vista itself. So it's not an object, or Delhi, rather not Central Vista. Delhi is it's not a Central Vista itself. And only for architects and people who talk in the same parlance and this language, it's a big thing. But for everybody else, it is just a thing, So it's something like that.
So should we start with the?
I think we should.
I think we have got the numbers we were looking for.
Yeah. So how shall we proceed?
Would you like us to put something up on the screen?
Yeah, in a while. Let's talk a little bit before. Yeah. So by let's talk, I mean I'll talk. I'm so sorry. No, I take this kind of a role with very little shame, and it's something that I ought not to do. But I feel like communicating, so I'll talk. So up to now, what we have done is that we have opened the windows or cleaned the glass to some extent to see much more than what we otherwise were not seeing. We have started seeing relationships where we thought things were separate. We have started seeing connectedness and interaction where we thought it was interconnected. And in all kinds of ways, we have done that across time. We have done that across tools, techniques, and forms. We have done that across practices. And so we have opened up our worlds, and it's been a rich experience, I think. Perhaps you were looking at your own work, but if we look at the work that happened all together in these so many minds and came together on on the screen, then we have come to a point where we have revealed the world in a different way. Now it's time to start doing something, or to start formulating something. Let's not use the word doing for a while. Well, let us start gathering. Okay, let's say we need to gather the thoughts into something which becomes available to us and others as a mode of considering the alter ego. How do we consider the alter ego of the central vista? Alter ego means the shadow that Shabnam was talking about today, the unseen reality, the thing which is not visible at first glance, something that is showing that the reality consists of both what is out there and what is here. By here, I mean in the world of huge diversity in India, which needs to be recognized or given cognizance. So this is our objective. And over discussion, we thought this objective is not the result of a single mind clarifying everything and making the principles and applying the principles over a certain reality. It is the participation in a reality, and in the participation between many, many different voices, that we will start getting somewhere some sort of a direction. This is very difficult to enact in a studio. Because in a studio, at the most, how many are we? 50, 60, 70, 80, not more than that. Yet, 50 is a good number. It is a very good number. Because they say that, you know, a single mind can only apprehend reality to a certain extent. And it is many minds together which start apprehending reality in a richer way, in a clearer way, or in a more profound way. And I think this is the inaction that we would like to do in this studio. That we would like us all to become participants in the process whereby some ideas we can offer on a tray. When you make something and you bring it to the person to whom you want to offer it, you bring it in a very gentle way and say, here, I've made, would you like to try it? We don't go and say, there, eat that. So we don't want to do that. We want to make it, bring it on a tray, and leave it to you and everybody else to decide whether it's good to eat or not, to try or not. So we are calling out to each other and we are calling out to society through this process that, listen, I have a viewpoint. I would like to say something. Here is what I would like to say. And that I is a collective I here. That's the kind of thing. Okay, that's the background to what we are suggesting we do. So for that, we have worked out a process which is rather intense in terms of the amount of participation that will be required on a day-to-day basis. Because now, today we are at the 4th and we end the studio on the 19th. There are exactly 15 days. And within 15 days, we want to make this wonderful dish which we will offer. So let's see what kind of process we suggest. Maybe Sudipto, we can share that document, or should, yeah. So we work in 4 stages. The first stage is what we call the village meeting. So every group, every room considers itself a village, a village meeting. And it will chalk out the core values. Each group will meet as a community of concerned citizens, as well as a community of practitioners. These 2 phrases are used here, and they both apply to you, each one of you. You are a concerned citizen as much as you are part of a community of practitioners. So you bring us certain special knowledge and skill to the task. That knowledge and skill may be from sociology, it may be from architecture, it may be from some other field, but you bring it to this. And we meet as a group, maybe 10 people, maybe 12 people, whoever, whatever is the group size. Through dialogue, and this word dialogue is also important to pay attention to. Dialogue means listening. Dialogue is not the same as argumentation. Yeah? Discussion, actually Krishnamurti used to point out that the root of the word discussion is to break apart. So that is why the word dialogue is used here. So through dialogue, each group will set out the core values that must be maintained while thinking about what to do or not to do on the site of altar ego. We will come to the site in a while. We have demarcated for broad purposes a space in which we will work. So the core values is what we are looking for. The values each group will work out may be related to aspects that the group considers important, but at least the following must be addressed. So the first is where and when. And land, water, vegetation, and forms of life now and in the future. That means the land as it is, where the water flows and is or is not, the vegetation is there or not there, the forms of life, including human lives, which are there or nearby, now and in the future. The question for which the core values should be put down could be, in what way would the village meeting lay down what can be done, but more importantly, what must never be done in relation to land, water, vegetation, and forms of life. So you will write down a sort of manifesto that such and such cannot be done here, or you cannot kill, for example, if I take the extreme position. Now, along with that, I've written down a reference there, which is, I came across this person, she writes wonderfully, and Lata Mani, she has written an essay called The Tree and I, which is put in the studio library. Next core value will be with regard to who. Who is this place for? If it is for all, what does that necessitate? How do you make a place for all? How can all kinds of people, all ages, genders, castes, and classes be included and feel at ease here? Is this a bounded place or is it without boundaries? So some kind of core values about this should be written by the group, with perhaps some hints at what might be the ways in which that might be achieved. For that, the reference is Richard Sennett's um, two articles which have been put in the studio library. Third is how. What manners of an action would be encouraged, facilitated, supported, and what should be difficult to do in this place? What does this imply in terms of categorizing, dividing, connecting, organizing this place spatially and temporally? Because through working on space, we make some things easy to do and some things difficult to do. So some kind of a policy or some kind of a core value of what kind of space are we looking for? The reference for that is Ivan Illich, Epimethean Man. There's a video in the library and there's an article that he wrote, both of which are wonderful. And I would strongly recommend that you look at these references by yourself and think about them. The fourth set of values is, what about neighbors and distant entities? In what way would the place be cognizant, take into account neighbors and distant relations? What would be our relationship with them? In an interconnected reality, how does one place relate to other places? What must not be done so that the place continues to respect the whole? This hints at the common way of thinking where we draw a line on a boundary and we think about some objects completely unrelated to any other objects or any other phenomena which are around that place. So this whole thing is to be done by each group. Each group will lay down the core values as a document today and tomorrow. The document to be prepared, so it will be a set of resolutions as a PDF, including sketches, in case you would like to put down some ideas in sketch form. And it will be delivered to the next group on 6th September by 2 p.m. That means on Sunday, 2 p.m. IST on Slack. So you will do this document as a group. Certainly there will be differences, there will be discussion, there will be, but a dialogue will happen through which you come to some form of agreement as to what should and should not be the nature of this place. What should be the core values that this place of alter ego upholds. That is what you will do. The second stage, you will consider yourselves to be karigars, artisans, makers, who work on site under received core values. So your core values will come from your neighboring room. You will not be working on your own core values. You will pass it on to the next group. And you will get something from the neighboring group, which, so you got a set of core values and you got a space within which you are to work. So this is a stage of deciding what program to propose on this site, given the statement of core values received from the village meeting of another group. It's not your own, remember, it's from another group, and you've received it, you will see it in full responsibility of doing service to those core values, of being sympathetic and responsible to those core values, and yet deciding a program, what should happen there. So the first step is checking and critiquing the core value document. You'll go through it and you may have some differences with it, which you will note down and then modifying or altering the document while keeping the original spirit and intent intact. You may feel that some of the things which the neighboring group has given you are not quite well stated or are garbled or are too extreme, and you may want to modify original spirit of their would remain. Hello? Then next step, formulating the design program, which you will do as a group. Then developing a schematic design. It's not a full design, it's a schematic design stating in what way the program, and then you will write a statement of how the program that you have designed and the design that you have made respond to and fulfill the core values given by that other group. So we are trying to foster a sense of working together here, rather than the sense of individual glory. And I think this is something which we hold as one of the pillars of the ChaiPochè studio, that we work with, we work together to achieve or come to some point of thought, but we never take glory from it as individuals. So you will receive the core value document on 6th September at 2 p.m. Group discussion and modification of core values received will be on 6th September itself. That means Sunday is a lot of work. Group discussion on program, 7th September. So you have 2 lectures on that day, and you have to use the time in between and the time before and after to do that. Design schematics discussion and finalization the whole of 8th September. Schematic design drawings on 8th and 9th September. So this is the longest period because you have to do a lot of things. And so delivering documents, that means drawings and your statement of how they fulfill the core values, that will be delivered on 9th September, 2 p.m. IST. That's the second stage over. Now it goes to the third group. So you will receive something which was a core value done by one group, onto which a schematic design had been done by the second group, and now you are the third group. In this stage, you become users inhabiting the place. The group receiving the schematic design now imagine how they would visit, use, and inhabit the site. They will work as follows. They will each speak on behalf of an imaginary but specific probable user. It could be yourself. It could be somebody else. Let us try to include as many voiceless people that we know of. So they will opine what they would like to do there. Somebody might say, I would like to sleep under the shade of the tree. Somebody might say, I'd like to bring my children and play with them. Somebody might say that, really speaking, I could earn a living by selling maybe something there, and so on. So you bring all these views of voices there. The core values will be respected while imagining possible uses. And group members will discuss all the desired uses in the light of core values before accepting them. So the group will form a kind of panel which decides, yes, this use can be allowed or should happen here because it is in line with the core values, but such and such should not happen. And the more you bring to the table of the kinds of uses, the more this discussion becomes rich and useful. The group will now together review the schematic design they have received and will show how the desired uses can happen there, or show what modifications need to be made to the design to allow such uses. The group will now make revised drawings based on inhabitation patterns in the received schematic design. So you are at this point, you are the users and you are saying, no, really it should work this way. So the receipt of the schematic design is on 9th September at 2 p.m. Two groups have already worked on it. Yeah? You are the third group working. Discussion and listing of uses and inhabitation patterns on 9th September. Modification of schematic design, modified drawings, 10th and 11th September. Delivering the revised documents to the first groups, that is the one that prepared the core values document, 12th September by 2 p.m. IST. So this having gone through three groups, it comes back to the first group. And then there is the fourth stage. Each group will now receive their original core value statement along with the subsequent revisions, the schematic design, the modified schematic design with the revisions discussed and made at each stage. They will also consider that what is coming up is to be non-invasive to the neighboring places and relates to them in accordance with the core values. So again, you remind yourself of the world at large in which this, whatever you propose to do, will be within that world. The group will now refine and finalize both program and design based on an initial discussion in this group. They will now make a final presentation as a group. So now you will take the design and evolve it more. You will take into consideration everything that went on before, and you will finalize the program and you will finalize the design. But always the core values are that which are the ones against which you are seeing the design. So the receipt of the previous material is on 12th September 2020 at 2 p.m. IST. But the final presentation is on 19th September 2020, 9 a.m. onwards. So this is what we propose as the process by which we will do the next few stages. I think we can listen to some questions on that before we go on to the, Sudipto, to the site. Yes. What do you think?
It's by far the most innovative way of doing it is what I've seen, and I really love it the way it is.
But it's going to be tough, huh?
Yeah,
Tough.
deadly.
Yeah, across our time zones, yes. It definitely is.
Time zones are the least problem, actually.
No, time zone should be working for you guys. You know, when some is
Yeah,
some are
it's
sleeping,
going to be a
others are
relay.
working.
It's going to be a
Yeah,
relay.
exactly. Exactly.
Have you got the spirit of it? Have you understood that four parts?
I think it requires one to be very respectful actually, because as it's a sort of Chinese whispers, but where one has to try to keep the initial idea as intact as possible with the
Yeah.
least interference. So it requires a lot of respect for the, and I mean, obviously it's very stretching. It's very stretching in terms of this our field, creative field, where there is a lot of discussion. I mean, everything is just gets blown away by ego. So I think it's a real collaborative exercise. I mean, in the real sense.
Yeah, you got it absolutely right, because we did talk about Chinese whispers, and we thought that we might be able to do that actually. But anyway, in the process itself, it's becoming Chinese whispers. You're right, 100%.
Mhm.
It's a kind of game. One of the things about ego is that egos are are prominent when winning is to be done. Huh? But when the game is like fun, and winning or losing is of little importance, then I think this can happen. Ramchandra Gandhi, who wrote this book called Sita's Kitchen after the Babri Masjid was demolished. He's a wonderful thinker, and he wrote about cricket as this kind of thing, where nobody is real. I mean, he was talking about Test cricket, not T20. He said Test cricket is where everybody is enjoying the game and clapping, even where their opposite team fellow bowls well or uh, strikes a sixer, um, even though they are going to lose. So it's that kind of thing. Yeah, yeah. Chinese whispers.
Yeah. If I can share something like from one of my studio exercises. So like the very first exercise that we had as a part of our introductory studio exercise was that it was this game called Chinese Whisper only. So what we had to do was that we were in a group of like 4 to 5 people, and what we had to do was that each person would have to share a story to the person sitting next to the person sitting adjacent to that person. So what would happen is that in a group of four, let's say if there are A, B, C, and D, then A will share the story to B, and simultaneously C is sharing the story to D. And in the next round, C will share the story that D shared to A, and what B received from A will be shared to C. So at the end of the cycle, what was happening was that so when let's say the A started sharing the story, so when the A would receive his or her story back, the whole intent or the whole narrative of the story would have been very different. So the whole interpretation and how the things that was passed from one person to another person was changing continuously in this interpretations and in this thing. So it just reminded me of of that one small exercise, and I was just relating it to that of how with so many people uh, discussing and interpreting, it would be
Hmm. But
interesting to.
the difference is that you have to remain faithful to the core values which were originally written down. You have to respect the integrity of that group, that they did a lot of work, just as your work will be respected by somebody else. And at every stage, it is always the discussion goes back to not whether this is fantastic or wow, but it goes back to, does it fulfill what we have set out to do? So each group in the first stage is saying, this is what we are setting out to do. This is what we consider valuable. This is what we consider of great importance to humans and the world at large.
Professor Chaya, just had a question. So, like in the phase 3, where there are sort of personas that are going to populate the space. I mean, in that sense, I mean, would there be a sense of subversion as well, or is it does the same respect need to continue?
No, respect doesn't mean agreement. It means questioning. Real respect requires questioning. If I don't question you, then I don't respect you. I consider you to be so popo that I can disregard what you say. But then I question you. So the voices will question in a way in which something important can become part of the core values. And whether you call it subversion or you call it voicing, it is the same. Yeah, I think it would be that way. That we do not listen to so many. And now it's time that we started listening. We started listening to the germs and bacteria, but we also started listening to other human beings. Those who catch fish and those who kill rats and those who go and collect fruits from the forest and make honey. All those people we have to listen to. Yeah? And maybe they have something of great value to add to the core value. Yeah, Goa electricity is gone.
Yeah.
So I have a question regarding the kind of scale of values that we're looking at, because if we make it generic, then it becomes open to interpretation by the next group. But when we make it highly specific, it shouldn't limit them. So in what sense can we play around with this sort of how do we define this value? Do we make it broader, or do we make it very,
Let's take, for example, let's take water on land. Because now everybody, we all realize that cities are suffering because we didn't think about how water moves over the land. And with climate change, it's going to get worse. All over the world, cities are getting flooded. Even now, there is so much. Yeah. So let's suppose we take the idea of water over land. And you say, water will be given full consideration in the shaping of land or in the interruption of water courses, say, for example. Or in a more general sense, I might say, water will not be fooled around with. Yeah, the rain will not be fooled around with, but rain will be made a part of the site. Suppose I put it that way. And I've got a very general statement. I can write 10 other statements and each group will come out with something in relation to water or in relation to soil or in relation to microorganisms or in relation to fungi or in relation to birds, and each one will do something like that. And that should be not a kind of set of rules, not bylaws. You know, bylaws are so badly written because they think that they have to be unambiguous. And that is where most of law, you know, the lawyer's profession is built upon the ambiguities in law. So they try to make it less and less ambiguous and write it down, write it down, write it down. And all the time still we are getting all the messy things. So suppose we give up that approach and we say, generally speaking, we should be relating to each other in a way in which your independence and my independence is not compromised. Say, for example. And I said, then everything else will follow from that. So it could be as general as that, but it might be specific where you feel it needs to be. It may be that in some cases, for example, when Christ says, thou shalt not kill, the 10 commandments, for example, or the Sermon on the Mount, these are the kind of statements which are ethical norms which are laid down, which are fairly specific, but also open to interpretation. So it's difficult to say. When you are actually writing it, I think you should discuss a lot as to what it allows others and doesn't allow, and whether it should be so constrictive or whether it should be so vague. Both of these conditions you take into account. The primary belief of this is that all of us as human beings have the resources, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, to do these things in the most healthy manner. You and Kevna and Richa and Shivani, all of you and me and Riaz and Ayaz, we all have these resources. And it's not a matter of development. It's not a matter of practice. It's a matter of just being human. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's a kind of t-shirt, but that apart.
Just to add to the point of not being so specific, I think what happens is being too specific actually opens up for vandalism, because like for example, I mean Bombay is every single balcony space has become like an extension of living room. So I mean the more specific you get in terms of the usable space and things like that, it becomes very, very open to being kind of perverted. In fact, in London also there's for example there's no restriction to the number of chimneys you can have in a house. So you can actually technically extend your house by 3 floors, but convert, like by designing, say, 50 chimneys on the roof of your house, and each of the chimneys is navigatable as a room. So there are all these crazy kind of loopholes that get created by overly specific, bylaws. So yeah, I think operating principles would be a good way to.
Yeah. Terry Eagleton has a very wonderful passage in his book on literary criticism, where he says that in the London Underground, there are signs which say, dogs shall be carried on the escalator. What does it mean? Does it mean that if you have a dog with you, you have to carry in your arms? Or does it mean that you cannot go on the escalator unless you have a dog to carry? And it's very interesting that language itself is full of pitfalls like this. We'll have to be, but it will come because the next group will look at it and they will find the gray areas and they'll say, no, this is not the original intent. The intent of these people, and they can come back to you and say, what did you intend? Do you really mean this? And then you can say, no, I'm sorry, but we got it a little messed up. And then they can modify it. So it will be a process where we will all together, we will be carrying the ethos of alter ego all together. That we will be responsible for each and every product from this studio. Not your product and not Riaz's product and not mine. We'll be responsible for everybody's. Wow, that's something.
I think that's the most amazing thing of this exercise, that it makes you think that, I think the first scenario is that you have to convey what you want to tell, or you have to really write it down well and sketch it well so the other one can understand. Because also if the other one doesn't understand, is that we haven't done it in a proper way, I think. No, so it's like it's to really know how to communicate, and I think it's one of the most difficult things that we have. And also like to be responsible, to take care of the other's thought, to construct it in another perspective, like in our perspective. So wow, yeah, I wanted to say that. It's amazing.
That's what societies need to learn. Right now, we've lost the ability to talk to each other. We can only shout at each other.
Yes.
And we cannot think together. And this thing is so necessary. Otherwise, the world is going to go. Or at least humans. चला गया. वो donkey भी नहीं मिलेगा. वो जो सुबह बोली कि you will be born as a donkey if you are in that other town. You won't even become a donkey. You will be just vanished off the face of the earth. Yeah? So that's why this talking to each other is one of the practices that professions need to learn. The professions are built on that horrible notion that we are antagonists. But also, that doesn't mean that we cannot disagree. There can be disagreements and there can be different views. But it is still part of that ongoing dialogue of a society or of a culture, of a civilization. And today it will be world civilization.
I think even the way we have to put ourselves into different shoes in each and every exercise. I think that is also very important because in a way we have to think of a perspective of becoming a user and not as a practitioner at some point, and also like at some point we have to become the practitioner and actually become the worker over there. So I think that is also a very important thing which this exercise looks at. And
yeah, we never think of the people who actually make things.
Yeah.
So would you like to see the site then? Huh?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Yes.
You go, take us through.
So we are now familiar with this, right? So for those who are a little bit unfamiliar, let me just probably come back from, I think I should start with, give me a second. Yeah. Just a minute. Okay. So we have Google Earth, and you can see Delhi, dusty Delhi. And now by now, you know, this is the river, this is the central part of Delhi, this is south, and then the ridge is the green that you can see in bits and pieces. And so we are looking at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, or the President's house here, with the north and south blocks. And behind is the Grand Gardens. Sorry, can you all see it? And behind there is this crescent is called the Mother Teresa Crescent. And behind that is the parts of the ridge, the Aravalli Hills. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of music from somewhere.
I suggest if you're not speaking actively, can all the participants turn their mics to mute, only to avoid noise, and then unmute every time you want to talk?
Okay, so thanks for that. This is the India Gate. You can see the India Gate here. That's the little the canopy which had the King George statue, which now remains empty. And this is the new war memorial. Now, our idea was that we do not work or do not look at this as the site, which is the site for the new redevelopment process, but we look at the site perhaps more to the east, between the India Gate, which is there, and all the way to the river here. Now, what all happens there, we can just look at. We have got, you can see the National Stadium here, which is a small hockey stadium. And behind that, there are some army barracks, some military barracks. This is the National Gallery of Modern Art, which is also called the Jaipur House. This is an old colonial building. This is a new extension which happened in the late 80s, early 90s. And across the hexagon, this is what we will refer to as the hexagon, or is referred to as the hexagon. Across the hexagon on the other side of Jaipur House is the Jamnagar House, which is this corner here. And you'll find a lot of low, and I'll show pictures as well, a lot of low government offices, which were really military barracks converted into. So we are also looking at this as a possible place of intervention, although it's still west of the India Gate. But all this area one can think about. This is the army areas, which because of the stadium is kind of a block, but the army areas have the possibility of kind of looking into the central vista in some ways. Then further east we have this is the Mathura Road. Beyond the Mathura Road, we have the zoological park, the zoo, the Delhi Zoo, which is this one here. And north of that is the old fort, or Purana Killa, and this is also supposed to be the old Indraprastha site. This little water body is a moat, but it's rain-fed. It catches rainwater, and that water also kind of percolates into the zoological gardens here. Further north of that is the new site for the Pragati Maidan. You know, the Hall of Nations was brought down, and there's a new building that's being built here. There's the National Science Museum, which is a fairly prominent building, which is this little triangular thing here. There is Charles Correa's Crafts Museum somewhere in between the trees, somewhere there. And this entire wooded area that you see in this corner here is the shrine of Matka Pir. It's a shrine, but also along with it is a nursery, which a horticulture nursery, which can be also looked at as a site. But then beyond, in front of the Pragati Maidans, or the exhibition grounds, is this little parking lot, which used to be the parking lot for the Pragati Maidans because there was no parking inside. And so this is a large parking lot with one corner of it having a temple here. This blue thing that you see is the temple. It's called the Bhairav temple. And then the road dips and goes underneath the railway lines. And across on the other side, we have the beginnings of the floodplain of the river. You have the power station here, the Yamuna power station, which is the thermal power station for generating the electricity for Delhi. And all this area is really heavily wooded, and it's quite pretty actually to walk through this. They're making some kind of an underpass that you can see here, which would basically allow you to get on to this outer ring road coming from the Bhairav Mandir side, and you would be able to kind of come and join the outer ring road. Further south, you will also see the ring rail network that you can see the railways, and also this large bus station here. It's a bus terminus for DTC. This was an earlier landfill site, which has now been converted into a garden. And so I will quickly share some static maps, which will, yeah. So we have the drawings here and the drawing here, and then we kind of highlighted some zones, or we had highlighted very initially some zones. What you see in this carrot red, or at least carrot red in my screen, is the Jamnagar house. The little yellow thing there, along with the other buildings, is all the, that yellow thing was some NGOs for Clean Ganga Mission, but these other buildings are all government barracks. The violet is the Matka Pir Shrine, along with the along with the nursery. The green is the large parking lot in front of the Pragati Maidans, and then the blue is the area of the floodplains which lead onto the river. And then we also kind of felt that perhaps you can also consider this entire area which has been marked in red as the possible suggested site. Now, how you would decide on picking one area or another is left to you, or we can have a discussion on that. But this is where we are at. And I can also take you through some images of the site. Sorry, I should probably do screen. And so if we start from the India Gate side, for those who are not familiar, I'll quickly run through the pictures. I'm sure a lot of you already know this area. Tell me if you can see the photograph of the area. One photograph, can you see?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just standing here looking around. So these are the the lawns of the Central Vista with the jamun trees, and then the boat club water. Sorry, this is kind of a panoramic view, which you should be able to kind of zoom in and take a look later. And looking on to the India Gate. These are areas around the India Gate. This is the image looking onto the Rashtrapati Bhavan, looking back through the India Gate and to that Chhatri of King George V. And across you can see Hyderabad House on the other side. This is the National Stadium, the stadium that you saw on the map. This is what it looks like from outside. It's a colonial building again. And yeah, this is kind of panoramic view. And on the across on the other side is the War Memorial, which is kind of a gated space, which is quite insular. You can't really enter. So you can see the kind of opacity that this entire area has because of the stadium, as well as these walls of the memorial, which are closed. And this is the camera has been placed on top of the gate because one could not enter. So this is what you see inside. It's kind of ruthlessly barren. And the lawns which were once used for playing cricket and picnics all have been kind of quieted. Let's move on to the Jamnagar House site, which is the, I told you, a complex of offices, government offices, broken up by small streets and boundary walls. These are the barracks. I've got the image on the side, on the bottom right corner. You can sense the kind of barracks on the side. More or less temporary in nature, and they've been here for, I think, now 50, 60, 70 years as a temporary government office. Voters Center, Indian Roads Congress office. This on the other side is the UPSC, or the Union Public Services Commission building, where the IAS officers give an exam to clear the IAS and join the IAS cadre. Across from the other side, this is the lane, and then across you see Tourist Information Center and so on. But I mean, this is the some of these areas are panoramic. So I mean, the photographs are panoramic, so it's a little difficult to see. But this is the other side of Jamnagar House, again, offices. There's a small temple here. So I'll be placing these, of course, in the common pool, so you can take a look at it later. Let's look at the Clean Ganga Mission area. These are not too many pictures, so if you get past this quickly. These are again the government offices, government barracks, which are right behind the National Stadium. And these are the NGOs which were also built in barrack kind of structures for the Clean Ganga Mission. Yeah, really not doing too much, it appears. Let's look at Matka Pir side. So some of these images are from the net. So that's the Matka Pir area. This is the entry to the nursery from the side of the Crafts Museum. A lot of old trees. And this is the wall which adjoins the Craft Museum, and you can see the Craft Museum roof on the other side. The entrance to the Crafts Museum. And then kind of a panoramic image, where you should also be able to see the old fort at, yeah, you can see the ramparts of the fort wall on the other side. This is the shrine itself. It's on a little bit of a hill, and people kind of, I think one of the offerings are these pots, and these pots kind of gather all around the shrine. And those are the steps to go up to the shrine. The Bhairav Mandir side, you can see now the construction kind of barricades for the ongoing construction of the new, whatever has replaced the Hall of Nations.
So what has replaced the Hall of Nations? Just what is the what happened?
This building, I don't know what it is. It's a large convention hall. And the quality of the architecture is there for you to see. But that's what it is. This is the this is the National Science Museum. National Science Center, it's called. Done by Kanvinde in the 90s. And beyond the Science Center is another access for the Pragati Maidan, which is that. Going towards the underpass which goes under the railway bridge. That's the underpass that you see. Then you take left to go to Rajghat, which is the monument, or let's say the memorial to Mahatma Gandhi. Sorry, I'm seeing a lot of chat. Is anything addressed to me? No. Okay. And these are some, I think, squatter settlements to do with the construction that's coming up on the other side. And this is from the other side that you see this vast parking lot, which to my mind becomes available now that the parking has been taken as part of the convention hall buildings. So this really becomes available. And then the old fort and the monuments, that's a Humayun's library building up there. Maybe one of them. I'm not sure whether that's exactly the one. That's the Bhairav Mandir. quite a popular site, quite a landmark in this area. There's actually an interesting story about this temple, but the story is not about the temple, it's about the prasad they give, which is country liquor. And apparently there were craftsmen who came to the crafts museum, and one of them was a simpleton from Chhattisgarh or someplace like that. And I think this story was in one of the books, I'm not sure which one now, I forget. So he came, and the guards of the crafts museum invited them to have laddus with them or something of that kind, or dinner or something. And then after that, along with the prasad from the Bhairav Mandir. And sorry, these are the images of the area beyond the outer ring road towards the river. So I'll just breeze through this. That's the construction that's happening of the underpass. And you see the power station chimneys beyond on the left side. So yeah, these two then, so there was a carpenter and this potter, this craftsman from Chhattisgarh. And after the meal, the carpenter got up to leave. So this guy followed him, but he knew nothing of Delhi. He had no idea. He did not speak the language well either. But the carpenter tried to get onto a bus and he got on, and then this guy followed, but he could not get on the bus and he fell. And then the carpenter saw that this guy had not boarded the bus and he had in fact fallen on the road, but he could not get off. And then this little poor fellow was missing for a few days. And then they filed a complaint. The Crafts Museum director filed a complaint with the police, tried to reach him, and they were kind of quite sure that this guy was now lost or would never be found. But apparently he came back, and he said that somebody had helped him to the hospital, and then from there he left, saying that I would now go. He started walking back to his village, and since he came from came by train, he started following the tracks. Now the railway line around Delhi is a ring railway. So he ended up at the same spot, and from there he could actually see the Crafts Museum, and he found his way back. But that's the story about a little bit of. But these are the images towards the river, and you see, this is again a panorama, which is annoying, but now you're at the banks, but you find your way through the trees onto the banks of the river. And this is right after the lockdown and a shower. So the river is actually very clean at this point. And the banks of the river are like this. They are unmaintained. You can see the Vilaiti kikar, the Prosopis juliflora trees, but some other species as well. This old steel bridge. There is a small little things within this kind of wooded area. This one looks to be kind of somebody's house, but he's obviously made a temple around it, so he can't be moved. But you kind of find these kind of houses. This is now onto the railway tracks on top. And I'm now looking back both ways on the railway tracks, walking across the river. Looking back at the power station. And then the river. Yeah. I think further on you can see that's the Delhi Noida bridge, DND, what we call the DND flyover, which connects Delhi to Noida through a toll road. It used to be a toll road, now it's of course, there's no toll on it. And on the other side, you see this would be the bridge across from, I think beyond the power station. I forget the name of that bridge, but it's the one that connects to Pitampura on that side, to East Delhi. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If one needs more pictures, I'm happy to go and take more. But that's around it. That's what we have. Sorry for that unnecessary story in the middle. I don't know why I started it. Would you like me to bring up that map again and stop there? Riaz, shall I?
Yeah. I think also if people have questions, if they want any more details.
Any questions? So I think the questions that they must all be thinking about is how do they decide? How do they pick or select? And at what stage do they need to pick the site? So I think that's something that is we'll probably have to think a little bit more on the first stage and then look at the site.
I think in thinking of the first stage, a much larger entity would always be a useful one to think about, because otherwise it becomes too specific to spots. Yeah, and I think it is useful in laying down the core values to think about human activity and inhabitation on land amongst other humans and other forms of life and so on. And then you can close in when you are doing the actual design. I think that is the second stage, the Karigar stage. But at the first stage, yesterday, for example, Riaz had asked whether we should go across the river and look at space there as well. And at first I thought, no, it becomes so big and so on. But then I thought, suppose we think of this as a chain of spaces all across, which are even going beyond Delhi. That the core values are applicable at all points, but very clearly ruling the sense of place of alter ego. I think that would be a nice way of looking at it. So you can find a site a little later. I think first you think of the core values, at least of that red marked thing that Sudipto had, and the Jamnagar house part. Together you see it as a series of spaces. Together, what would be the core values that affect that?
Can I just come in here with a few thoughts, if that's okay? So I actually think you should keep it maybe the site available, or either ways. I'll turn on my video. So it's just to say that core values could also lead to ways of not just constructing ethics and values, which is the most important thing. You absolutely have to do that. But it could also lead to ways of thinking about action, right? So the difference between the use of nouns and verbs, I think, is an important distinction. So, for example, thinking of the site as something that is a temporal, productive landscape would lead to a different way in which those core values are considered and written about. So we, for example, have in planning, we are always looking at things top down. We are making decisions on sites at large scales, but core values could be written in a way that talk about verbs. So for example, the difference between, say, a trace and the idea of mapping, whereas mapping, because it is ing, it is a verb, it is a practice, it is something that is produced. So I just wanted to say that the way in which you write the core values are not just about the ethics of things. Of course, they are the ethics of things, inevitably so. But I think you should ask yourselves, what is the instrumentality of those ethics? How are those ethics implementable? What is the agency of those ethics on the ground? How do they translate to actions, micro actions, and so on? You know, that if you were to really design with those ethics, what are the implications for design? Just for example, the idea of temporality, I think, is a really good one, because our sites are temporal. How do these actions change over a day, over a month, over 10 years, and over a million years? You know, like what is the instrumentality of the ethics over these periods of time? Right? How do these core values constitute a site across time, for example? That I think is a question of instrumentality. So the ethics are I would like to kind of instigate or provoke you to say that, or to think that ethics are good only insofar as they are instrumentable, right? Like, yes, thou shalt not kill. Okay, great, thank you. But I'm breathing and I'm living and I'm killing bacteria and viruses as I talk to you. So what does that really, how does that translate into a way of engaging with the world? That is my question. And that is a rhetorical question. I think you should weave that into the way in which you think and write about these values. So it's not just to sort of sit on a high horse and preach, but it is to really get embedded into the making of something.
You know, in this, what Sarosh is saying about verbs and nouns, it's very interesting and very, very important. In Japanese, in English, we say, I love you. Yeah? Or, so it's a kind of possession. Yeah? But in Japanese, you don't say I and you just say loving. You can't say I love you. Where there is a transaction going on, you can only say loving. So I stand in front of you and say loving. And then it's a different verb, different action happening together. And so growing or balancing happening, yeah, rather than we will impose a man, or we will decide a way of seeing that there is a balance of energy and species. Yeah? Instead of that, think in terms of what could happen. I think, Sarosh, I just wanted to add to what you said.
So the exercise begins today, stage 1.
Yes.
And there is today, tomorrow, and Sunday. And then Monday is a heavy day because we've got 2 extremely important talks in the morning and in the afternoon. So, so 2 p.m. On Sunday seems to be the time that you need to kind of stick to for the core values, all of you. And so if there are any kind of questions or uncertainties regarding that stage 1, I think that we should address now while we are here. There are also 6 rooms, and if you could just by a show of hands or by, I don't know, or you could just put it in the group later, that how many of you are active in that group, so that we have 2 sets of 3 groups each who are circulating their exercises within them. So we could go perhaps, how do we have the sequence? You've got Daryaganj, Dholakua, Kakanagar in one, and then Kotla, Majnukatila, Mehroli as the other, who are circulating amongst each other. And so that's like a cycle that's happening. Unless there are too many or too few in any of one of those rooms, then we'll have to rethink about this.
Would you
So the idea is
the groups?
Yeah. Sorry, I did not understand the question. What was the question?
Can you repeat the groups, please?
Oh, so yeah, I'm just looking at it and the way it's there on the Slack channels, the way it's been put, and I think they are possibly alphabetically. So it's Daryaganj, Dholakua, and Kakanagar as one set, and so this is not one team, this is not one group. The groups are, there are 3 groups, but one set of groups who are circulating the exercises amongst themselves. And this next set is Kotla, Majnukatila, and Mehroli. So that's the second set of groups. So I think considering the future of the exercise, the site, you will have to kind of look at the arrival at a set of core values. And are we also, I mean, for this, you would have to, of course, look at the studio work so far, the talks that you've heard, and so on, and all the assimilation of that. That's a bit of an assimilation exercise at your end as well.
I want to the advantage of speed. Intimidated by the
Sorry, Arias, I can't hear you.
Yes, we can't hear you.
Okay, I'm going to put off my video. Maybe my bandwidth is a little low. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, it's better. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so I just wanted to add to what everybody had already said, and I wanted to say that one can get intimidated by the short, quick need for speed, so to say, of these exercises. But I would urge you all to look at it as a required thinking that has happened with the preparation of the ground that the earlier exercises uh, have done, the ground that they've prepared, the amount of thinking, the responses, even the kind of confusion you may have felt as a kind of churning and clarification. And the fact that now that you're being asked to act very quickly is part of the intent. And I think that you should use that as something that yeah, I think that you should use this speed to be sharp and to take decisions quickly rather than overthinking things. And this does not mean that there will, I mean, that there will be lesser deaths, but it means that that we will trust the instinct and as Professor Chaya said, the instinct to be able to decide what is of value to you. So I just wanted to add this thing about speed, that one should look at it as something very positive.
Do you think it might be a good idea for every group to elect a gadfly? You know, a gadfly is a guy who comes and keeps prodding and saying, hey, what do you think? Hey, what do you think? And, you know, keeps the dynamism of the group activity alive. And that gadfly can be different at every stage, so that 3 people or 4 people get a chance to become gadfly. You know, in the Lions Club, I've never been a lion myself, but I've heard that they've got a guy called a tail twister who goes around every time there is a Lions meeting. His job is to twist the tails of people and make them cough up donations for some project or the other. So like that, you know, in Gujarati we call it Ugrani. Ugrani karwa aayo. And we need somebody in each group who will follow up and sort of say, hey, come on, we can't sleep.
And Ugrani of ideas.
Ugrani of ideas and feelings. Yes. Yeah. So I think every group, you can decide for yourself who will do it for the first stage and so on. It might be a good idea.
Might I also suggest, and I think all of these things are just suggestions, but might I also suggest that, because I really miss the kind of tangible, you know, if we were doing this in a studio, there might have been a file or a set of documents that were physically passed around, but we don't have that physical entity. So in the absence of that, might I suggest that we use this thing called the Miro board? If you're following the Dholakua thing, we've got a Miro board. It's essentially a board. And that board is then passed around as the artifact that moves between groups as this exercise develops. So in the first case, the core values will only be sketches and so on. But one can then actually trace you start getting a trace over time, right? You start getting this kind of thick, almost palimpsest of things as this board develops. And then, of course, the board comes back to you. So I think the Miro board might be, to be honest, we haven't discussed this as instructors, but I think it could be a good artifact to exchange.
Yes, I also feel that the Miro board should be used as a board and not as a software, in the sense that the software itself kind of leads the representation in certain ways where it becomes more like arrows and diagrams and so on. I think you should use it as a canvas where you scan and post, you know, rather than actually drawing on Miro. I think it would be encouraged that you draw on paper or sketchbooks or whatever, and then take a picture and then post it on Miro rather than trying to draw on Miro.
Absolutely. Also, the Dholakua Miro board is interesting because you'll see that students have done that, people have done that. There's lots of, gets messy, but that's okay. It can be cleaned up or not.
I would kind of also suggest that you think about when you're playing the roles, what kind of tools you will use in those roles. Because the way you draw, perhaps as a citizen, might be different from the way you draw as a karigar. And I think that it's really important to think about these kind of things so that the disciplinary ways of seeing also kind of bend with the roles that you're playing.
I wanted to suggest if we could even have a roundabout of the instructors across the two sets after every exercise.
The instructors are going to be everywhere. So, and doing roundabouts.
I see that, for example, we've never interacted with Sarosh ever. So when he says that, when he says that we at Dholakama, then we feel that we are not at Dholakama ever and we don't know what's happening. So let's have that thing that where we experience the other person as well.
Thank you. I'm flattered.
Sarosh, don't be so easy to flatter.
It's just how it works here.
No, if the groups are moving the Miro board clockwise, then the instructors should move anti-clockwise so that they are not moving with the boards.
Absolutely.
The boards should get other people then. Yeah.
Can I also suggest that in the Miro board, when people are putting things onto a board, it's many people putting in. Like in the Dholakuang group, I saw that it was one board for a single person, in which it becomes a little. It takes away from the what do you say? The gravitas of seeing a single page at one time. Just a suggestion.
So I think that, as Miro boards it's only as good as what you make of it. So as you discuss, you can sort of exchange, you can do post-it notes or things, you can sort of discuss on it. But one can always, when you hand it over, there should be an act of summation, of cleaning up, because the act of handing over is a very important act. So you don't want to give someone a half-eaten roti. You want to make sure it's done well and presented well. I think the act of handing over could be that moment when things are brought to some momentary summation.
Yes.
But what is implied is that every group will have a board rather than every individual will have a board.
Yes.
So all the members of the group will work only on that one board.
And just as if you ever produce a drawing together with other people, you realize that, okay, at some point when I have to present this drawing, I have to go over everything and I have to clean it up, and then I have to pin it up and then take some distance from it and then see, is this kind of making sense? And then still discuss with other people and then clean it up a little more. And then it's given, it's presented, it has reached a certain fruition for that time. And then when it comes back to you, it's yours again. So I think this idea of handing over implies a certain presentation, but I don't mean presentation only in the kind of architectural sense. I mean presentation like it is presentable. So At the moment, this is not presentable, but you get a sense of how messy these things can get. You can zoom in, you see how detailed they can get.
Who's done the sketch?
Always, am I right?
I'm sorry, yeah, that would be me. I was just trying a different way of presentation rather than those boxes, little boxes. They've confined themselves in it.
Part which is presentable.
Yeah.
Yes. Very nice getaway.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Did you use an Apple Pencil?
No, I was doing it with my mouse.
Oh, that's not bad.
I mean, it can be explored. You can do a lot of stuff on it.
Hmm. Any other questions? Any questions regarding the previous exercises?
We want to tell you that, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
So we want to tell you that the previous exercise is to continue, and in the sense that the what you will do in this exercise may affect the way that you look at some of the things that you had set down as propositions in the earlier exercises, and you may realize it either as limitations in the way that you were looking at it, or in terms of a particular actual physical situation in the city, creating an opening in thinking about those situations. Both may happen, but in the way that, let's say, you chose tools or thought about them or chose a geography. When you start looking at values, you may realize certain things about your choices earlier, and you may want to take those further as well. So just to say that that's always in the background. Those first three exercises are always in the background of what you're doing in the 4 stages of this exercise.
Divya, you were saying something, but we can't hear you. No, you're not on mute. Okay, sure. Praveen's put up the Hall of Nations and what's coming up instead. Thanks for that. Yeah, no, you're not, Divya. We can't hear you still. I think
Some
it's
more
your...
photographs by. Sorry.
No, I think Divya is trying to speak with your... Yeah, say that again. I think we caught a little bit of it.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we'll be handing over the exercise, will we be presenting it? Like, will the previous group present it to the next group? Or will we be handing over a manifesto or something?
There will be a delivery note and receipt which will be signed by the group which receives it. And it will be a formal process in which there will be no verbal dilly-dallying. The document will have to speak for itself.
Okay. But I just feel with such a small time frame, sometimes we spend a lot of work, a lot of time in representation and in trying to convey, which I mean, you can't be that free to, sketch as you like or write a lot, because in the end, you'll have to represent it in a certain manner for somebody to understand it. So if there's a small presentation by the previous group, it might be better.
I would not agree to it at all. I don't know about the other instructors, but I think
Not at all.
there is a sanctity to the process, which is the process by which democratic decision making happens in a participatory mode. Now, if I want to use words like that, yeah, I hate to use them because they've become so chawaila, I mean, things are just spitted out. So it's not like that, but it is like the short time is a way of keeping away from over complex machinations. It is also a way of being free of paralysis. The more time you have, the more you get paralyzed. That I've noticed in myself and in all my friends. And it's that response. It's a response you are giving. It's not a sort of construction that you are doing. See the difference. And I think we will gain a lot by that. So that's why the short time is given very carefully. And that is why also the impermeable boundaries between stage 1 and stage 2.
I also think that a lot of the personal idiosyncratic things that happen with beautiful sketches will drop by the way for something that is communicable and has to be passed on. And I think that's a very important aspect of this exercise. As much as we enjoy those little things that make that sketch and open up things, but this is not that process. That process you've already spent 3 weeks close to exploring and looking at the subjective. This is about communicating with other people and about decisions and very, very important values that we must be able to communicate and share with no information loss, if they're really important to us. And the fact that we so much of what we think or portray as being important is under the guise of the subjective individual is exactly where we are becoming a little bit irrelevant because we are not able to say what is, in very precise terms, what is important to us. I often get from students, but also from people in the office that no, but that's a personal or a subjective thing. And when you actually think about a lot of those things, they aren't. And I think we've already gone through that process of the subjective part, and that's why I think this ability to very sharply communicate what is important to you is part of the discipline of the exercise.
Hi, I'd like to add one small thing here. There was this very interesting mapping done, in terms of, this again a UK-based mapping, but it was this sort of mapping which started from how a particular structure is, how a particular structure manifests on a landscape. And what is interesting is there were 54 agencies or something which were involved in the decisions which lead up to when a structure is actually built. And I think the architects come at number 48 in the chain of decisions. So it starts from, from the sort of political vision. It comes from, I have this listing somewhere. I'll share that on the group. It's very interesting. I mean, in the UK system, architects come purely to decide how it looks. it's essentially comes at the end of land use, it comes at the end of economics, it comes at the end of zoning, all of those agencies have already gone through it. And to my mind, this exercise is really, really amazing because it gives an opportunity to swim upstream and downstream, right? It actually allows one to predict land use and frame a far-reaching vision for land use rather than, the pure design aspect of, just purely manifesting what has been. So in that sense, it's very empowering to be able to look at it as, not as tabula rasa actually, but especially after Khyati's talk, I mean, kind of realizing that there's no tabula rasa, there's nothing exists. But I mean, in that sense, to really have visionary requirements for someone to implement. So, yeah.
I think for the present Central Vista development, redevelopment, number 48 has moved quite a bit up.
All the other numbers have become servants of that. Number 1 and number 48 in cahoots.
But the best part is the Mela. I mean, that's the most amazing thing. Like, in fact, even what's amazing about the Sabarmati, the riverfront project, is it's a perfect skate park. Like, it's built for skateboarders. And it's just a matter of time before that community takes over. The graffiti artists, it's like, such exposed concrete, matlab kahan milta hai itna? So like, you just need the stencils and the spray cans to come out one day. I was actually very interested in, yeah, sorry.
No, please. I was just going to conclude.
So
please.
one of the itches behind this, these sort of briefs is that you want to start becoming a participant yourself, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, what's really interesting is that I was wondering if, one of the core values was to have a zero carbon footprint. And if you had a sort of a performative index as well, it's possible to look at data and performative indexes also to put into the manifesto to some way. I mean, again, that's just my 2 bits. I mean, that's the way I think, but it could be interesting to look at very hard metrics that really force the hand of the karigars.
I would hate to be in the group who got stuff from Ayaz. Like he sets it up. You're the karigar. You have to do all the metric work. And your next 3 days, 4 days are like jacked because Ayaz has said that it must prescribe to a green building rating.
No, but the karigars, they know how to cheat also.
Yeah, that's true.
But let's not give all the fun away.
You better be careful about metrics. Yeah. In Gujarati, there is one bhajan. I'm sorry, most people will not like this, but it says that vajana kare te hare. He who weighs will lose.
Yeah.
Bhajana kare te jeete.
Oh, wow.
The metrics are something. The measurement is an illness of modernity, which erases the heart. And I think it's very important to bring in measurement at a point at which now you are being more sure. Before that, the heart has to operate. So even if the metrics are coming in, they must come in after the heart has had its say. The heart must first say. That means the group has a feeling for not spewing out carbon. We hate it. Yeah, and then yes, the metrics.
As in the spirit of the exercise, you can also exchange with one of the participants, and then one of them can become the instructor.
I think to go back to Ayaz's point, it's also interesting to ask the question, which metrics? So, of course, metrics are important. One cannot totally wish that away. But which metrics are important is a question of ethics. So, yes, carbon is important, but as is rights of other people, other creatures. So then how do we generate? I mean, this is the problem of our time, is that our metrics have always been useful but extremely linear. So how do you construct a metrics that are thick? I think that's a very poignant question. So one may not be able to actually do the metrics, but one could lay perhaps the groundwork for a thickening of metrics, if that makes any sense.
In that regard, the Naomi Klein lecture, the Edward Said Memorial Lecture of 2016, which I put on in the library, is a very interesting one, because Edward Said used to say, I have no regard for tree huggers. And everybody thought he was, being very, very bad. But then she goes through the whole thing and puts it in the context of all the injustices, and then looks at environment as one aspect interrelated with war, with refugees, with this, with that, everything. And I think that that article is a wonderful opener for seeing this thick metric that you are talking about.
Thank you. That's absolutely spot on. So her most recent book, The Burning Case for the Green New Deal, is exactly that. And the Green New Deal is misconstrued and very much sort of politically abused here in the US. But the idea is very simple, and that I think the word just transition is more important than the word Green New Deal, which is to say that, people are hurting, people are losing jobs in coal and jobs in all these polluting industries. And the green economy, which is now a totally capitalist economy, has made another profit-making machine out of greening things, and decarbonization has become yet another capitalist enterprise. And so she says these two things must be united. So we have to construct a metrics where, when I lose my job, I should get something. When Pakistan or Bangladesh, they contribute to less than 2% of greenhouse gas emissions, and their vulnerability is in the top 10 nations. That is justice, right? So one has to weave justice into metrics, and that is something as a society we have not done a good job of. So I think the idea of core values is interesting, because I would say personally for me, one of my core values is, how do I weave justice into questions, social justice into questions of ecology.
I think time everybody got back to the drawing boards, or to the Miro board. Sudipta, what do you say?
Yes, I think the resounding silence is indicative of their itching to go back to work.
Yeah.
Interpret that in any way you wish, because it is resounding silence.
Okay, on that note.
Bye.
Okay. See you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So I will be available in the Dholakua room for the next 20 minutes or so.
Why didn't you stick around here, Sarosh? So that people who have not had a privilege of...
I have something called class, so which is actually paying me a little income, so I might have to do that. But I'm around for another 20 minutes, maybe in ChaiPochè. Is that better than?
Yeah, then
okay.
I think people can just join you here. Yeah.
Okay, so ChaiPochè. Yeah, all right.
You are here. Don't leave. Don't leave. You are here already.
Yeah. I'm in. Oh, okay. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. I'll see you guys. I've got to ground.
Bye bye.
Riaz, what are you up to?
No, nothing.
Are you
I
going
mean,
to be in ChaiPochè, or what are you doing? I have 20 minutes, after which I really
yeah,
have
yeah.
to
So
run.
no. So I'm going to listen into your conversation, and then leave also in a bit. It's yeah. So that's it.
I think I'm going to leave.
Okay, Ashil.
We'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Okay. Thanks. See you.
So should we move to, should we just hang around here? What are
Yeah,
we doing? Because it
we
looks
can
like,
discuss. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, all right. But it looks like
a group.
most people have left, which is fine. Yeah. I mean, if it's only the few of us, then I suggest everyone who wants to participate turn on their videos, unmute their mics, so that it's not just us talking. Tejas bhai, how are you?
I'm good. How
I
are you?
really liked your PowerPoint. I actually went through the whole thing. I'm sorry I didn't comment yet, but I loved the Matka Dargah. Is it a Dargah? It's a temple. Yeah.
It's a dargah. First
It's a
was the
Dargah,
reference
and
was a temple.
it's a beautiful practice. What I like is the relationship between material thinking, mythology, and time. It's very, very beautiful.
So both the presentation, I think you have seen the first exercise 2A and 2B, the 3 I have put. So it was a short time to prepare to think because the timeline was short. But still, I thought that whatever can be put together in a with a context what has been given to us and some sort of thoughts put together. I made a that exercise, which is a I think one exercise. Two was very short and but I want to know the feedback on exercise one. So it not be very softer aspects what just Professor Chaya talked us that let's not wait and bhajan should be that example he told. So I have taken in a different way. I just waited everything. I don't know how it is important and what extent it can
You're
be taken.
talking, are you talking about the newspaper mapping you did, which is also very nice? I saw that also. Yes. So you
In the
took the
first,
newspaper and you studied how the newspaper is used for a long duration of time.
yes.
Is that the first? Is that what you're talking
No,
about?
no. The first one is about the reimagine the Delhi. Should I
Yes.
share my screen?
Yes,
You
please.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Hitachi. If you want to, you can just also chime in and participate in
Yeah.
Tejas Prize presentation.
Can you see this slide?
Yes.
Yes. Now.
Okay, so this is I just thought to take as a reference that what Delhi should look like. Not even Delhi, the many of the areas where the important thing is the economy, the farming, which is the nature, and the society put together. So this is the photograph from somewhere in Poland where there is a central street is a the market. Then
Yeah.
the both side after market there is a residence, and after that there is a personal farms. And so it's a very balance between the how you drive the economy as well as you be with the nature. So I took this as a reference and then started thinking the how Delhi should be. So this is something absolute engineering and relative engineering. So these are the terms which I have been talking about. So far, there are many projects I have done. Most of the time, the engineers are only get introduced once everything get freezed. So they have only to think about what is available on the drawing. So it is a more like hardcore informations. But here, what I am experiencing right now, it is like a relative engineer. So being an engineer, I am getting involved into the all process, what you are thinking, the with context, and this is taking me in a very beautiful way to the whole journey. And if this project comes, I think I would be the happiest person to do it very sensibly, because I know the background, what and what sort of a evolution process has been done. So I called it as a relative engineering, and I think I most of the times I insist to ensure the relative engineering take place and be a part of that group. So this is about what sort of an approach I thought of in doing this thing. So this is a golden circle. So when in the corporate, when we go to the people, they ask that why you are doing, when the money comes. So this is the how I think. Then I thought that why I'm doing it, the why I'm reimagining the Delhi, what make me to think of, and then how and what. So I just started putting up objectives. So to redefine the spaces in Delhi through time-space relativity theory with a different perspective. So I went back to so I opened some books and I started really literally seeing to the how this space time theory works, and then I worked on exercise. I am thinking that yes, the Delhi or maybe the India will be the next robotic era or artificial intelligence era, because now after COVID, I think many things is very fastly getting turned into the automation. Even in office, just retina scanners happens and door opens and many things are happening. Then so how to reimagine the Delhi with this context? Then third, that the how the cultural legacy to the next generation can be extended. I will show the next slide that what is the today's condition. And today we are talking about the what was in the past and how interestingly we did into the past with a proud. So I think it is now our responsibility to create some history. So upcoming generation would also talk about us that yeah, somebody do. So I think these four which instantly came into my mind that I should work upon these four objectives and then move forward.
Yeah, I like that. So can I just or yeah, sorry, go ahead. Because I think that in the already like these 4 points, and maybe also in your next slide is the beginning of this code of ethics, or this core values that has been talked about. Because I like, for example, just to pick up the second one, okay, reimagine Delhi as artificial intelligence and robotics. So there is, of course, a lot of anxiety and also optimism around artificial intelligence. And I think, for example, and these are things to bring to the discussion and to talk with other people in the group. But for example, how will we consider the question of privacy, individual privacy, and public space in a world that is highly surveilled, right? Where you have cameras that are looking at you. I mean, somebody said that in a 5-minute walk in London, there are 150 cameras that are scanning you. So they are scanning your retina. They're. So will we have to construct spaces in the city that are safe zones where there will be no digital surveillance? That could be a core value. One core value could be that there will be parts of the Central Vista where there will be no surveillance of the state. What does that practice produce? What kinds of things can happen there when there is no surveillance? So I think this idea of, and of course I'm kind of picking up the more dystopic side of things, but maybe it also has artificial intelligence can also have highly productive and useful purposes, like learning languages. When our phones are filled nowadays with artificial intelligence embedded in them. There is a book by that I was reading by this writer called Toby Orb, and he talks about existential threats, and he puts artificial intelligence as the largest existential threat that humankind will face in the next 50, 100 years, which is really scary. But one of the things he says that imagine that, because what artificial intelligence does is that it feeds, it's a feedback loop, right? So it keeps getting more and more and more intelligent. So he did this mind-blowing thing where you plot a chart. I'll have to stop talking at some point, but just artificial intelligence brings up a lot of things. So you plot a chart of the computing power of chess software. You know, this computers that play chess. And sometime at the turn of the century, around 2003-4, was the first time that we invented a chess machine that beats the grandmasters every time. Like now there is no doubt that, you know, every single time the chess machine plays against a grandmaster, it will beat the grandmaster. But now they've made a machine that they did not teach it how to, this is really crazy. They did not teach it how to play chess. They only taught it the rules of chess. And in 4 hours, it taught itself how to beat the grandmasters. Think about that for a minute, right?
Yeah.
And it can play other games. It can learn cards. So this is artificial intelligence. It is learning different things.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing that it knows how to do is self-preservation. This is the problem with, this is according to Toby Orb, and maybe this is dystopic, but this is that the only thing it knows to do is how to preserve its code. That is one of the core values for artificial intelligence, that I have to preserve. Any human being has the same thing, self-preservation. So then comes the dystopic side, that maybe it will replicate itself on everyone's computers. Maybe if it feels threatened, it can switch off the internet, it can switch off electricity, it can crash airplanes. I don't know. But that it can become an existential threat. So what does it mean to have a core value around artificial intelligence? I'm just picking one thing.
Yeah, true. So here I can just tell you that you must be knowing the sunny Singapore, the place which is near Nasik. In that village, nobody shuts their door, and every time it is open, you know, and there is no, you know, nothing robbery and nothing happening. They are not even closing the door. So it is more like, you know, when the population increase, the density increase, the control comes. When the control comes, many things come. But when there is a less people, the control doesn't come. I think it is more like, you know, leverage to enjoy the, you know, celebrate and many things. So I'm trying to even address that point in this presentation as well. Should I move? Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. So I have put that in a priority, so I can, you know, smoothen up the taking a decision that what should be my priority, and maybe somebody's priority can be different. But here I start with the, if environment is fine, then society can, you know, evolve, and then the economy can evolve. So I think we have our bigger target and bigger mission is to work on the environment. So with taking a priority, I have moved forward. These are some metrics which how the Delhi is, what is happening, and pollution. This is to be taken care. Again, here the Delhi population, we can see that the around the world, even Delhi is the fastest growing and populating city. Even in an Indian city, it is a highly fastest growing populated city. So in both ways, I think we can say the Delhi is going to be a very highly populated even in next 5 years if this is the pace. When the population density I took it from, and then I could understand it is a 660 square feet per person is available in Delhi, horizontal space. Okay. So which is very less. I think the two flat of 3 BHK or 4 BHK, only the horizontal space is available for the one person. Whereas in Singapore, it is a half of that. So it's a 1200 square feet per person. And that's how this density is affecting to the overall city. The consumption is increasing, per capita income is increasing, but the resources are decreasing. Yes. So here the very huge imbalancing between the waste generation, the capital income, and the availability of resource in all the ways. So here the huge balance which has to be, I think, should be, you know, to be made with some sort of design efforts. So this I took as a time space theory. This is a fundamental which was given. And what I did that started putting the lines from where the rural areas of Delhi started getting converted into the urban areas. So this was the point around 1991. This was started happening, and I think if I would have been this place, I would have gone to the 1991 and the reimagine the Delhi, so what Delhi should be. So what I'm talking about, it is with the perspective of 1991, that what I could have been done if the chance was given. Here the again the how population is growing and the how it is taking place even into the 2011 and then now 2021. And one thing from this graph we can see that the people is migrating from surrounding states. They are increasing day by day, year by year, and the natives are getting reduced and maybe the equal. So I think the huge populated people, the migrated people are there. So I think we have to address them, that what we can help them, so there is no density coming up into the Delhi. So here, so this is the one part is that. Second, I am starting looking at it as a different way. The space time is there, which we have the given the perspective. But third element is the energy, which is getting produced out of this time and space. I think that energy now we have to look in a different way. So I'm just taking a cycling as a just a example because I keep cycling. So this is a good to tell about. So when the time space we keep going on to the many, we go for the 200 kilometers, 400 kilometer cycling, and rather than getting tired, I think we get a lot of energies. And what we do many times, that energy comes and make our blood circulation, so that energy has to be directed somewhere rather than just putting inside. So right now that population is increasing. The population, we consider that as an energy. That energy has to be redirected by someone, some people, so that can be become a productive. So this is what I want to tell from this slide. And how. So there is a this constructive cycle. There is a 5 elements of nature. I think there has to be a balance between them, and we ensure that everything complement to each other rather than controlling to each other. So right now the matrix we see in above, it is not in balance. So if we do in this way, we can do, but this is just in a fundamental I took. So earlier times, people used to say that the settlement happens where there is a water. Then the one era came, then people start saying that there is a highway goes where the settlement happens. Now for last 5 years, people say that yeah, when fiber optic goes, the settlement happens. But I think now the most important, the air,
That's really
where
great.
settlement will happen where there is a breathable air. And I think this is the new era which we have to really focus on. Air, air is an important part, and we have to talk about that. So this is how I am seeing that let people, profit, and planets will complement to each other, and we move on that direction. So this is about, so I'm not from Delhi, but many of my relatives and friends are from Delhi. So when they call me and they talk about Delhi, instantly, what are the images comes into my mind? That I start thinking about the Modi, then unforgettable Kejriwal, Nirbhaya, recently the Shine Bagh, and this the Hanuman statue in most of the Bollywood. But this is the sketch which is the really important part of it. Delhi, the Yamuna never comes in my mind. Yamuna, I don't know. Then this Qutub Minar or nothing. The most of the population, these are the fussy thing. They are just diluted into the mind. So this which is the prominent image has influenced this real heritage in such a way that we don't know the Delhi with the as a heritage city. So I think there is a imbalancing happening even here, that what we talk about and what really existing Delhi is about. So really, if we want to talk about the Delhi, I think let's talk the statues and that monuments opened up themselves with this reference I'm talking about, and let them talk the stories to the people who are coming to the Delhi. How then there is a some sort of a water festival, everything is celebrated in Ahmedabad. I think nothing happens in Delhi, not nothing, they are celebrating. There are the somebody posted this wonderful video, the language which is lost into the core Delhi. I think that language has to be revived. There was some lecture was about the Rana Safis, a wonderful lecture which understand
Hello.
that what Delhi is about.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Rana Salvi's lecture is also very wonderful to listen, which I
Yeah.
want to. There are no
Just
such
by
a
I
word.
have to leave in 5 minutes. So if you want to come to some kind of, do you have more slides or do you want to talk about some core value related to this,
Okay.
or how do you want to do this?
So I go fast in a 2-3 slides, which are the most important. So these are the what the Delhi should be about, which I am talking. This is the YouTube, how the we are talking about, the new youngsters doesn't know. There is a link. If we go, the really Delhi people doesn't know what was the Delhi about. This is an important thing which I am just putting an
Yeah.
emphasis on, that what if there is a cruise services from Delhi to Agra through Yamuna, and I think that can happen if something happen in Mandovi River in Goa. I think this can happen over here, and there is a connection between the Agra, Jaipur, and Delhi in terms of the heritage and culture and history all put together. I think if we make a heritage triangle developing this area, then the many new opportunities can shift from Delhi to here, and most of the people are from the Rajasthan, UP, and Haryana, and I think they will like to come over here and stay in this triangle, because right now what is happening, the most of the migrants are the single men who are leaving their home and coming over here, and even they damaging their own family and local religions and culture. So I think this triangle, if we develop, I think this is the new development can take place. I think right now having centripetal force, everything you see in the the Rajori Garden, or maybe in a central part area, there is a lot of population. I think there should be a centrifugal force for the population that has to go out. So metro is required from connection from Delhi to outside nearby cities or nearby towns, rather than making a within the city.
So yeah, I maybe I can just say a couple of things regarding this because I really have to leave. But I like um, your thinking around connectivity. But I want to say now, if for example, if we create a core value, or if we create a different kind of thinking about infrastructure, and we say that maybe, so our problem with infrastructure, the way in which we create it now, any infrastructure, whether you think of the metro, or you think of the river as infrastructure, as connecting things, we tend to think of infrastructure as in a kind of highly linear, efficient way, right? So somehow it's about humans connecting to efficiently, effectively, point A to point B. But what if we thought of infrastructure, because you have a road or you have a rail line, can it do more than one things? So for example, the section of the rail line is a certain way, it collects water, it collects, one can immediately think of it as a bioswale, as a remediation corridor, as a corridor that links different wildlife and species together. So now suddenly you're thinking of infrastructure as a much more complex thing that is not just efficient, but it is effective. It is also inefficient. It is connecting. It has an ecological function, right? So what if we said that all the infrastructure that you design as a core value will have to have an ecological function? It could be to collect water, but it will have to have multiple layers of ecological functions, not just one. Because our problem is we are always only doing one. That is what has created all of these crises. And what if we say that now we have to think about biological corridors, because species are more diverse when they are connected. This has been proven. If you study like ecological corridors, bioswales, and biomes, one realizes that one needs to think of infrastructure in this kind of hybrid way. And there are some instances I was looking at where they've designed, the bioswale as first an ecological infrastructure, and then the train or the whatever it is, even if it is a bullet speed train, it is just an element within the bioswale, right? Bioswales are interesting because they are essentially corridors, but they are ecological corridors.
True.
So because it can also be used for remediation, it can be used for all kinds of ecological parameters in addition to connectivity.
Correct.
Just picking up from what Sarosh is saying, this the older industrial way of thinking was fit for purpose. And the thing that you could kind of look at is that anything you do has to have must be usable in multiple ways. And you have to then maybe stratify 5. I'm just off the top of my head saying that there must be at least 5 levels at which they can operate. And as Sarosh is saying, one of them might be ecological. You might say that there's a social strata to it. There must be a social function to it. You might even say that one of the things that we don't do is have infrastructure. We don't even have an aesthetic to it. So I'm just saying, this is the way you might look at infrastructure. It must have an aesthetic function. It must have a social function. It must have an ecological. So if you're able to kind of establish those stratas, and then say, that could be one. So
Give me, I really have to run because my students are waiting for me now. So sorry,
sure.
I'm going to make a
Sarosh.
bye.
Sarosh, I'll talk to you in the morning tomorrow.
Yes, please.